Hi, welcome to Saltpetre Cave at Carter Cave State Park. My name is Susan Neumeyer. I'm an archaeologist. I work at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, but today this doesn't have anything to do with Kentucky transportation. This is also known as Archaeological Site 15CR99. And this is one of my favorite spots in the whole world. And I'm very excited to show it to you virtually. I wish I could show it to you in person, but there are a bunch of reasons we can't do that right now. It's late July 2020, and we're in the middle of the COVID crisis. And so most of you can't be here. There are only two of us here right now. My mask is off to the side. I've just taken it off in the past couple of minutes. Don't know when you'll see this or how you will see this, but the cave is closed from Labor Day to Memorial Day because there are Indiana bats that hibernate here. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service protects the bats during the hibernation season. So this cave is really special for a number of reasons, for the cultural resources that are here and for the biological resources that are here. Indiana bats are a threatened and endangered species. Of course, we're here to talk about the archaeological resources. This cave was mined for saltpeter, an ingredient in gunpowder during the early 19th century. It was mined primarily for the War of 1812, but I suspect also a little before and a little after the war as well. So come on in and join me, won't you? So now we're down in the first room of Saltpetre Cave, also known as Archaeological Site 15CR99. And this cave has the most surface evidence of saltpeter mining of any place else in the cave. Now, I need to explain a little bit about what happens when you mine for saltpeter. Saltpeter is one of the three main ingredients in gunpowder: saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal. When they got saltpeter, they shipped off those crystals to a gunpowder mill, which were located in Lexington and other areas. So here they made the saltpeter. Saltpeter is potassium nitrate. In some of the rock shelters in eastern Kentucky, they were probably getting straight potassium nitrate. But in caves, like Saltpetre Cave here, Mammoth Cave, Great Saltpetre Cave, they were probably getting calcium nitrate. So there was an extra step in the mining process where they needed to add a potassium element to what they were doing. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But the potassium or the calcium nitrates are found in the cave earth, in the caves. So they would excavate the earth, put it into vats. In the larger caves, Mammoth Cave and Great Saltpetre Cave, these vats tended to be very large boxes. In this cave, in the rock shelters, they were smaller and kind of V-shaped. In the V-shaped, in my publications, my thesis and some of my published articles, I call the box-shaped mining vats type A vats. And the rock shelter V vats, I call them type B vats. So in the type V vats that we have here, the sides are wooden and they were pegged together with wooden dowels. And they were meant to be pretty portable. So they would make these vats with two sides that were pegged together, and they would rest in a trough that the sides would fit inside the trough. Then the vat was filled with earth, water was poured in, and the nitrates would filter out, would leach out into the vat below. Now behind me, this is one of the troughs that was in this cave. In this cave, it seems like when the War of 1812 was over and saltpeter was going for a price of 75 cents to $1 a pound, When the war was over, the market collapsed, and saltpeter started going for between 12 and 15 cents a pound. So it kind of looks like in this cave and other caves, they put their tools down and walked out. And I think that's what we see here. Here's a cast of a saltpeter vat, and you can see the impressions of the wooden planks. And even right here is an actual piece of wood. And if we looked at it from the side, there's a hole for one of those wooden dowels that I mentioned. And during my excavation, I found in this room, all my excavation units were at the front end of the vats. So I found a trough underneath. One of the park naturalists at the time and we had this ongoing debate. Where were the vats placed? Were they placed crosswise along the front, along one side or the other? Where were the vats? Well, my excavation showed us they were actually placed underneath. So they would collect the liquid that flowed through. It was called niter beer. And they took the potassium liquid that they had made, put it in a boiling kettle, and crystals would start to form. And they would collect those saltpeter crystals, bag them up, and send them off to a gunpowder mill. Now in this cave, in this particular room, the limestone walls, the natural walls of this cave, are about 80 feet apart. But the saltpeter miners have altered this cave so much with the spoil piles, the room is actually about 25, 29 feet wide. They have moved so much dirt in this cave. And when the spoil was pulled out of the vat, they placed it nearby because they correctly believed that after a period of time, the nitrates would rejuvenate themselves in that dirt. And you don't want to haul your waste dirt someplace far away if you're going to need it again pretty soon. That's just back-breaking labor. So you put it nearby so that you can put it back in the vats when you need to. One of the steps they had to take in making saltpeter was converting the calcium nitrate to potassium nitrate. And to do that, they would have to collect a lot of wood, turn it into charcoal, run that through a vat by, again, using water and leaching the potassium out. And here's one of the vats that where we have evidence of them doing that. You can see this vat, this is one of my excavation units. This vat was almost nothing but ash. So they had burned the wood, brought it into the cave using one of the vats they have. Here's one of the sideboards sticking out. Leached the potassium through. At some point, they took the leachate, that liquid, took it outside, used a kettle, combined it with the niter beer that they got from the other vats, and started boiling it until the crystals formed. And one of the things I like about this vat is it has a nice wig of spoil pile from the regular vats, the calcium nitrate vats, here plopped on top. As we go through the cave, you'll see there's spoil pile placed everywhere. They processed so much earth in this cave, it's just phenomenal. One of the things I noticed when I was working in the cave is that, with a very few exceptions, which I believe came after the War of 1812, the vats in the cave operated in pairs. And here we're looking at one of the pairs. I excavated in front of these two units, or these two vats. This has really good board impressions on the sides and at the end. And over here, you still can see a little bit of the boards in place. And the reason, under this vat we actually found a trough in place, and it extends the length of this vat. It's about 10 feet long, we estimated. It goes back, extends into the spoil pile back here. And the bottom of it had small saplings. It was lined with small saplings, maybe an inch in diameter, some pine boughs, and the vat itself had a handful of nutshells in it. That, I suspect, was rodent activity post-mining. But one way, well, several of the ways I think they operated in pairs is they're closer to one another than they are to any other vat. They're oriented in the same direction. And in the case of this pair, there's a log right here, and I excavated, and this log runs all the way across. It runs, I believe, under the trough, so it supports the trough, keeping it in place. The vats, because they were meant to be portable, and the sides would just fall apart in two pieces, they would have logs running the lengths of them, and at least one end of each side of that log was held up by branches or logs that were forked. And we see those forked logs throughout the cave, sometimes sticking in the walls of the spoil piles. In that first area I showed you, there are some just lying about. And we did a reproduction of mining vat, and we'll see what that looks like.
So I'm curious, what you say that they were operated in pairs. And what's the benefit of operating it in a pair?
I think the benefit of operating in pairs was for efficiency. You would put earth in one vat, kind of the first run to get as much nitrate out as you could. Take that niter beer, put it in your second vat in a fresh vat of earth. It's right nearby, it's labor efficient. Run it again, so you kind of have a supercharged niter beer that you can take it and add it to your potassium liquid, your potash liquid, and start boiling it. I think it was for efficiency. All right, we've moved deeper into the cave, into kind of the central area. It's known as the Reproduction Room, for obvious reasons. This is a reproduction that we put together in 1994-95, largely based on the archaeological evidence that we uncovered. We have the V vat, and the sides of it are pegged together with wooden dowels. I tried to uncover the dowel, but it's a little bit dirty. They demonstrate, this is an active vat, and they demonstrate the saltpeter mining process here at Carter Caves. So it's full of soil. They've used logs to hold up the portable sides, as I've described, and some of these Y forked branches that I mentioned. But there weren't quite enough, so on this corner, a pile of rocks. And the most important thing that I've noticed about the mining process is the tools were generally expeditious tools. Whatever you had on hand to make the system work, you used. It wasn't a formal, mass-produced system. We're talking about 1812 to 1815. You used what you had on hand to make it function. So pile of rocks, some branches, logs, you've got it. And here, just as we found in the main room, the first room of the cave, they have a trough placed under the vat. We've got a barrel for our water. We've got a wheelbarrow to haul our cave earth into our vat area. And that's pretty much our reproduction. Okay, now we're in kind of the back part of the cave, known as the trunk passage. And back here, we only have this one area where we have saltpeter vats. And the vat before me is unlike the vats we've seen already in the front part of the cave. It is still a V vat, and the bottom part, the filtering part, is more like a pallet instead of the saplings and pine boughs that are present in the War of 1812 production. It's not functioning as part of a pair. It's back here by itself. And so I think that after the war, when the price collapsed from 75 cents to $1 a pound down to 12 to 15 cents a pound, probably what we're seeing is a cottage industry. The local men were the miners. They already knew how to make saltpeter. Saltpeter wasn't used just for gunpowder, but it was used in cooking. It was used for medicinal purposes. And so you're a local miner, local farmer, you had been a miner, you know that the cave's here, so you need a little bit of saltpeter for personal purposes, or maybe to make a little bit of extra money on the side. So you come in, you build one small vat, process a little bit of saltpeter, and go on about your way. So I think that's what this vat and one in the first room are representing, that small individual or cottage industry production.
Now, also, I'm just going to pan right back around so they can kind of see this large passageway, and maybe say a few words about,
The floor?
the floor.
Yeah, this trunk passage was where a lot of the dirt, the earth, came from, we believe, because as you walk through this passageway, you can see that the floor has been lowered anywhere from 1 to 2, even 3 feet in some places. There's a dirt line along the limestone walls. So they were coming back here, getting the soil to be processed, taking it to the front part of the cave, putting it in those vats, and working it further. So this is a really interesting, complex cave, archaeological site. It's really very interesting. And there's still a lot of questions here. As we've been working today, making this for you, we've been tossing around a lot of questions and theories. And if you have any, let us know. Well, we're coming to the end of our tour, and you may have a couple of questions. Your first question may be, well, who was doing the mining? Well, that's kind of my question too. We don't really know. The only name we have firmly associated with this cave is John Plummer, or Colonel John Plummer. There is a retired park naturalist, Sam Plummer, and in a family diary, they have some notes that say that Colonel John Plummer and 2 other young men supplied deer, turkey, and other meat to the miners. And that's all we know. We don't have any other names about who owned the mining process. The land was part of a land grant, so we don't know. We don't have a landowner. We don't know who ran the mining. We don't know who the miners were. No idea. It's very, very frustrating. Carter County was not formed until 1835, I believe. So this was part of Greenup County. The early Greenup County records were destroyed in a natural disaster, so we don't have information from that source. Something else you might be wondering is how much dirt How much soil did they process? Well, I have a terrible memory for numbers, so I'm going to read from my notes here. We did some estimates of all the spoil piles in here. You're seeing spoil or processed cave earth on both sides of me. And we used very conservative numbers. In this cave, at least 620 or 17,200 bushels of earth were processed. At Mammoth Cave, they estimated that between 3 and 5 pounds of saltpeter were achieved or obtained per bushel of cave earth. So that gives us a range of between 51,600 and 86,000 pounds of saltpeter from this cave. In 1812, Kentucky's total production of saltpeter was over 312,000 pounds. In other words, Saltpetre Cave at Carter Caves had the potential to have produced 29% of the total output in 1812. And that's in a state that had over 200 saltpeter caves and rock shelters. During the height of the war, saltpeter was selling for 75 cents to $1 per pound. So the operation here at Carter Cave, Saltpetre Cave, could have potentially generated at least $38,000 during the War of 1812. These numbers suggest that this site was one of the higher producers of saltpeter during the War of 1812. And if you ever get a chance to come here, please come look at Saltpetre Cave. We've given you a glimpse through here, but it's just staggering if you come down into this cave and look at how much material was moved and how much effort was put into this production. So I hope you get a chance to see this for yourself. So we've come to the end of our tour. Thank you for joining me at one of my favorite places in the world, Saltpetre Cave at Carter Cave State Park. I want to thank Paul Tierney, who's been my producer, director, fellow theorist and friend today in Carter Caves, for letting me do this. And I want to point out that in 2001, Saltpetre Cave was listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its association with the saltpeter mining industry in the War of 1812 and for its extensive history with the tourism industry. So thanks for coming along. I hope you get to come out and see Saltpetre Cave and Carter Caves in person sometime.